today we are checking out Le Beau by Jean-Paul Gaultier. Le Beau EDT, so there is a newer version out, which I believe is a parfum version. This is the original EDT version from a few years ago. A friend very kindly sent me a sample, and it's, yeah, I've been wearing it. So that's the colour of the juice. It's artificially coloured, quite a vivid blue. The bottle's quite cool. I quite like the bottle design, but how does it smell, more importantly? So I don't quite get it, the reviews that I hear about it, because people talk about it being like a coconut fragrance. Coconut being one of the notes listed. There's a few notes listed. So looking at the official website, they list the notes as bergamot, coconut, geranium, and tonka bean. I don't get much bergamot, although there is a slight freshness in the opening. What I notice immediately is the sweetness and kind of the texture, I would say. And I don't really fully get coconut. Maybe an impression of something along those lines, but it doesn't really smell like coconut to me. But I get this kind of creamy sweetness, and the texture reminds me of shampoo. Specifically kind of those more kind of thicker scented, like herbal essence type shampoos that are scented very nicely, and you can get ones that are even like tropical kind of scented with coconut in. So if I was going to relate it to coconut, it would be something along the lines of a very artificial shampoo-like concoction that smells generally kind of that kind of vibe, if that makes sense. But the texture to me and the overall smell that it comes across as reminds me more of a shampoo than it does a perfume in a way. So I get this kind of creamy sweetness. It's not overly sweet, but you definitely notice this tonka-like synthetic creamy sweetness to the fragrance. Again, a little bit fresh without particularly the bergamot being too self-evident. And the main thing that I notice as this dries down is just a big dollop of kind of woody musk molecules. That's kind of what I get, is this kind of big cocoon of woody musks around enveloping this, which almost feels like it's kind of coated in plastic almost. But it smells nice. It's kind of mass appealing, it's pleasant, it's not too sweet, and it's clean. It's daytime appropriate, I would say. A little bit more on the casual side. It smells younger to me. I think if you were at the ages of like 16 to 25, this would be maybe a good choice. Sure, there are men in their 50s and 60s wearing this as well. However, when I smell it, I think of like the younger age, 16 to 25 kind of age group, below the age of 30, I would say. At no point do I really directly or indirectly get a vivid, any kind of coconut vibe, personally. Again, I get a creamy kind of sweetness, which I'm presuming is what people think is coconut, with this big cocoon of woody musks enveloping the whole thing. It does sit quite close to the skin after the first hour and becomes a little bit more intimate on me. This is an eau de toilette, the original version. After 3 hours, I would say it's a skin scent. At the 4-hour mark, you would probably want to reapply this, and what's left on my skin is, again, the woody musks. Think in terms of things like Isui Super, that kind of bubble cloud of light woody musky molecules. I get kind of that kind of vibe, just with a little bit of sweetness behind it. To me, this fragrance is very unisex. If anything, the mid of the fragrance smells a little bit more in the feminine, I would say. And I think why this reminds me of something that could be unisex, borderline feminine even, is the shampoo scented connotation. This smells like a very nice scented shampoo that a woman might wash her hair with, and she might walk past you with, you know, lovely clean hair, and you get that kind of waft of shampoo-y hair. That's the vibe that I get from this. And so those kinds of shampoos that smell pretty like that typically are used more often than not by women, less frequently by men. And so it's funny that like a more maybe slightly marketed feminine product, you know, these kind of tropical shampoos, scented shampoos, that typically market a little bit more towards women than men, is put into a men's marketed fragrance directed to men but it's the smell of a shampoo from a feminine product, if that makes sense. That's the impression I genuinely get from it. I think a woman's hair would smell great with this, so I think it's completely unisex. And women could spray their hair with it and it would smell great. So for me, there's no issue of a woman wearing this. So yeah, borderline feminine for me. There's definitely nothing overtly masculine about it at any point in the fragrance. In terms of performance, again, about 4 hours longevity, you'd probably want to reapply because it's pretty light at 4 hours. The sillage and projection is quite nice within the first hour and then comes quite close to the skin, where you have to be here, you know, intimate space to be able to pick it up. If someone was to give you a hug at the 3rd hour mark, they'll definitely pick it up, but you'd probably want to reapply after 4 hours. Generally speaking, I think it's very pleasant. I actually quite like it. I wouldn't wear it myself personally. It does remind me a little bit of certain kinds of shampoos, albeit maybe a little bit sweeter, but I don't get an overdose of coconut vibes. I read in some reviews they got pineapple. I don't get anything remotely pineapple in this. I can kind of understand it though, in a way. There is a slight fruity sweetness that could be a little bit perceived as pineapple, but it's obviously the bergamot note, but it's like it's not obvious on my skin. Like, I have to kind of think about it to kind of get it personally. But yeah, a little bit of a fruity tone that's a little bit fresh and juicy in the opening. I put it down to the bergamot. It doesn't really smell of pineapple, but I could understand how the two would get confused with the tonka sweetness behind it, pineapple being quite sweet. I think the tonka sweetness mixing with a tiny little essence of bergamot in there might be perceived as pineapple by some people, but generally speaking I get a creamy tonka that's very designer smelling, if that makes sense, clouded in musks, woody musks, and that's pretty much it. It's not overly interesting to me. It's okay, it's pleasant. For more casual daytime and, you know, spring, summer, I would put it in that kind of camp. A very relaxed, casual, easy to like fragrance for the daytime. And I will see you soon with some more videos. Take care everyone. Bye.
One time he disappeared for 2 or 3 days. When he came back, they asked him where he'd been, and he said, "Oh, just sailing."